This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
On today's World Insight, the PLA conducts joint operation drills in the Taiwan Strait in response to Pelosi's trip. Are these drills the right response to Pelosi's provocative trip? And can China and the U.S. make sure actions like Pelosi's trip don't derail bilateral cooperation? We speak to scholar and former U.S. diplomat Susan Thornton to find out.
This just goes to show that, every administration that comes in the United States has an evolution in their China policy.
Here's our host, Tian.
Hello, I'm Tian, and welcome to World Insight. China's Defense Ministry says U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan is a serious political provocation to China. It says that the ongoing military drills are a solemn deterrence against the U.S.-Taiwan connection. The Chinese People's Liberation Army, or the PLA, has launched its largest military exercises around Taiwan on Thursday. The drills include a joint blockade, sea target assaults, an airspace control operation, as well as a showcase of the joint operations between the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The drills are in 6 strategic areas that encircle the island of Taiwan. Here's a look at those areas.
First is the eastern coast of Tian Island, a part of the Chinese mainland's southern province of Fujian. Tian lies about 127 kilometers from Taiwan Island and is also the narrowest part of the Taiwan Strait. 2 areas are off the northern and northeastern coast of Taiwan. They're just outside the open waters facing Keelung Port, which means that the port has been encircled. Live fire drills will also take place off Taiwan Island's eastern coast, directly facing the military bases of Taiwan in the cities of Hualien and Taitung. 2 other areas are in the south. One is southeast of the city of Canton, which enables the PLA to hold a strategic point of the Bashi Channel. Another one is southwest of the island that closes maritime routes and airspace of the city of Kaohsiung. The 6 areas where this week's live-fire military exercises are being held are the closest the PLA has ever carried out near Taiwan.
For more on China's live-fire drills in the Taiwan Strait, in Beijing, we have Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. Also in Beijing, in the studio with me, Zhang Junshe, Senior Research Fellow at the Naval Research Academy of People's Liberation Army. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Mr. Zhang, go to you. First question, exactly how would you describe the scale, the depth, and also the sophistication of this live-fire drill?
Well, I think this training exercise organized and conducted by the PL Eastern Theater Command is the largest in the history compared with the previous exercises that was directed against Taiwan Island. For instance, in 1996, we also organized and conducted a similar joint combat exercise. And now this exercise, I think, is much larger in scale, and also in depth is also bigger or deeper than that one. So, first, we can see there are 3 areas for the joint drills around the Taiwan Island, and simultaneously we conducted exercise, live fire firing, and also ballistic missile firing, and all these rocket guns and ballistic missiles hit targets, and their accuracy is exciting. We can see that all the targets were hit by this, and I think this demonstrated the determination and also the capability of the Chinese PLA to protect the country's interest or to uphold China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. I think from these 6 locations around Taiwan, we can see that actually we can blockade the island if necessary. If the Taiwan independence separatists want to isolate or split Taiwan from the mainland.
I see. The People's Liberation Army's Eastern Theater Command has started a series of joint operations in the air and water surrounding Taiwan. The PLA says the operations are necessary moves against the dangerous actions by the U.S. and Taiwan independence forces on the Taiwan question.
The operations will unfold systematically and extensively with multiple military forces. The operations include targeted and live-fire precision weapon drills, like joint blockades, air-to-ship attacks, air-to-land strikes, and air control operations. The operations will fully test the weapon and equipment capacity and Army's joint operational ability. We will be ready for any crisis. We sternly warn those who travel to Taiwan with sinister plots and Taiwan independence forces that the Eastern Theater Command has full confidence and ability to defeat any provocations, and we will firmly safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Now, Mr. Rong Ying, on this, of course, you're not coming from the military, and yet, strategically speaking, Chinese military having 2 main purposes. One is to guard for the China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The other, of course, is to keep peace in the world. Now, on the priority task, sovereignty issue, how do you see the scale of this operation this time, and why is China looking at the situation and make such decision?
Well, I think the responses by the PLA, the so-called, I think, targeted military operations in response to the provocative Taiwan visit by Nancy Pelosi is justified and necessary. It is justified in the sense it is purely out of self-defense, out of the need to defend and safeguard China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is, I think, justifiable in the sense that the United States has broken its commitment to China on the question on Taiwan. And more importantly, I think despite China's repeated efforts diplomatically to persuade, to stop this visit, the United States just went ahead and caused such a crisis and a tension, a threat to the region. So China's move, the PLA's move, the military operations targeted one, not only I think meant to defend China's sovereignty, but more equally important is meant to safeguard, to defend peace and stability in the region. Otherwise, I think no country can argue against that. No country can argue that against China's move, because when China's sovereignty and territorial integrity is undermined, every country should agree and should accept it has the right to respond, and for the sake of this peace and stability in the region.
Mr. Zhang, from the military perspective, how has the military been preparing for this day? I mean, a day in which that the military is exercising its muscles to showcase to the rest of the world that China can guard its territorial integrity. And also, how do you see the military, the PLA, from your perspective, has been preparing to circumstances and crisis on the issue of Taiwan?
Well, I think PLA, just as other countries' military, its duty is to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So I think during the routine, on the daily basis, the PLA conducted routine training to sharpen its combat capabilities to fight against possible enemies that for intrusion, invasion, or for suppression against the separatist forces on Taiwan. I think one of the main goals for the military is to safeguard the national sovereignty, to crush any possible attempt of the Taiwan independence separatists on the island. So we have practiced all the tactics directed against at maybe suppressing such kind of attempt of the separatists. Just like this, we showcased the blockade, sea blockade, and also the attack on sea targets, and also air defense, and also strike on land targets. So if the separatists on the Taiwan island, for instance, declared independence, we have no choice but to launch a war against it. We can arrest them for justice.
What is the significance of the Eastern Theater Command in terms of China's determination to guard its territorial integrity? What is the significance of this specific theater command?
We know that the PLA Eastern Theater Command is facing Taiwan, so its geographical task is to be prepared for any possible combat operations against Taiwan, or in case the Taiwan separatists declare independence. We know that during this recent round of national defense and military reform, we set up 5 combat theater commands. That the Eastern Theater Command is one of the 5, and they cover the area of responsibility is covering Taiwan. So, and its main task is to prepare for operations tactics may be used in this area. But there's other theater commands also prepare their operations tactics for defense of the motherland.
I see. Well, the question of Taiwan has been very much of focus of attention for the rest of the world. The foreign ministers of G7 nations, though, called on China Wednesday to solve tension around the Taiwan Strait in a peaceful manner. China has blasted the attitude of the G7, saying it exposes, quote, hypocrisy and ugliness of their governments, end of quote.
If these countries really care about peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, they should have persuaded the United States not to engage in dangerous, reckless, and irresponsible provocations against China. Before Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, they pretended to be deaf and silent, but now they jump out to criticize China's just actions, exposing their hypocrisy and ugliness.
Now, we earlier heard the response coming from the Chinese Foreign Ministry about the G7 statement. There are different understandings about what's going on in the region. Mr. Rong Yin, I want to go to you about that. At this moment, China is very determined to show to the rest of the world, to the compatriots on the Taiwan island, and particularly to the politicians in the United States, that China is determined to guard its territorial integrity. Mr. Rong, how should the rest of the world look at the series of responses and countermeasures that China has put out since U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan?
Well, I think it has been very clear, and also I think for the international community to understand the gravity of this situation, and also the determination of China to defend and safeguard its national interest. But I'd also have to be very clear: these responses, these targeted military operations, were aimed at these separatist forces these forces, these politicians in the United States and others, for the sake of their own personal agenda and interest, to create trouble, to destroy peace in the region. So it has been that's why I think China has made it very clear the moves, the responses is, on the one hand, it's a self-defense. On the other hand, it is meant to defend peace and stability in the region. There are so many cases in the past, now, and I think in the future that these kind of sort of a situation, if not dealt with properly, it can easily spread out of control. And it is sheer sort of a kind of force for the G7 foreign minister to speak irresponsibly about China, making remarks like that. Remember, just a few months back, when the Ukraine crisis broke out, it was them who forced the international community on the sort of excuse of sovereignty and territorial integrity. When China's sovereignty and territorial integrity is undermined, now they are talking about the exercise of restraints, they are talking about the calm. It's totally nonsense, it's totally rubbish, and hypocritical and double standard.
Now we will see the situation possibly getting even more intense in the next few days as the live fire drill continues. Now, how important is, Mr. Zhang, is the rest of the world understand the real essence of this issue and also understand why China is determined to exercise to present to the rest of the world its determination, and how much should the rest of the world try to understand the history related to the question of Taiwan before they made their judgment?
Well, this is a complex
it is,
question.
But it is very crucial, isn't it?
Yes, I try to explain what I think. First of all, I think the group of all the countermeasures the Chinese government has taken, and also the Chinese PLA are taking, aimed against the U.S. provocation against China, especially taken place by Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. And also, I think this is necessary and justified for a sovereign state like China to do so. We know that in history, the United States fought a civil war to maintain or safeguard national sovereignty and unity. So why China can't do this? And then now, although the mainland and Taiwan is separated by the strait, but we never have been two countries. It's only one country. We currently is continuation of civil war. And now Taiwan is part of China, and this is recognized by most of the countries in the world. 181 countries have established diplomatic relations with China, with the precondition or the foundation, political foundation, is that they recognize
with China, the
One
People's
China
Republic
principle.
of China, and
Yes.
the United Nations recognize
Yes.
the People's Republic of China.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jiang
Thank you.
Junshe and Mr. Rong Ying, for being with us. You're watching World Insight. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan has aroused some dissent within the American society. U.S. President Joe Biden allegedly tried to stop the visit but failed, apparently. Some say that the Biden administration was complicit in Pelosi's trip going ahead. Is that the case? Let's listen to Professor Susan Thornton's analysis. All the latest development regarding House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's earlier visit to Taiwan, what do you see is the nature of that visit and her strong intention to make it, even though the Taiwan authorities leaking out that actually the invitation was earlier once withdrawn?
Yeah, I think, Tianwei, this is a clear case of sort of the difference between the sort of democratic, system with the three co-equal branches of power and the system that exists in China, right? We have a very powerful individual, parliamentarian, a congresswoman who isn't really existing under the authority of the executive branch or the judicial branch. She can do, quote unquote, what she wants, and she made her own calculation, whether it be on sort of personal, political, or other substantive grounds that she wanted to do this. And it's very little that others can do to stop her. Now, I think the US government, President Biden, has made the point that, we do not support Taiwan independence. We stick to our one China policy. But as we've seen over the years, individual congresspeople in the US have, felt it was their duty and right to stand up and say something different. And I think this is the extreme case.
Having said that, though, earlier visits by other parliamentary figures, as well as political figures from the United States to Taiwan, is not acceptable to the Chinese either, to China either. So how do you see things would evolve? Is it going to be escalated?
I think in most cases, the people who are making these visits don't see them and don't make the calculation based on trying to run afoul of US policy or to stir up trouble in cross-strait relations or the US one China policy, but they do it to kind of show their support for Taiwan. And of course, that the US Congress has always seen itself, ever since the normalization of relations between the US and China and the so-called surprise that they experienced when President Jimmy Carter changed relations. Congress was very unhappy they hadn't been consulted, and ever since then, there's been this history of Congress seeing itself as the protector kind of Taiwan. So that's part of it. But the other part of it, and I think you were talking, before, there's a domestic political calculation here. And I think that is what comes into play increasingly as we see our domestic politics get more and more kind of divided, and we see sort of an increase in the volatility of politics in the United States. And I think, these kinds of displays go along with that territory. So it's possible that we, will see more of this. I think we have to figure out how to manage it between the government and the executive branch in the US and the authorities in Beijing. And I think there needs to be more discussion probably about that. It's no accident that there hasn't been a Speaker of the House visit in 25 years. So to try to say that the Speaker of the House visiting Taiwan is a routine occurrence is clearly not factually correct.
This is exactly what many Chinese are worried about, that this is going to be a Pandora's box, in a way, quote unquote, that one after another American political figures or others will try to use Taiwan as a bargaining chip in their political campaign, try to make use of these issues for their own good. Having said that, though, Susan, let me also ask you, one could argue we manage it pretty well. Why do we want to change the earlier path and earlier rhetorics and actions and become what it is? Why? Is it only because of the strategic confrontation and competition that the US sees about China?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right in that. I think that the earlier crises were managed because the US-China relationship was in a place where both sides valued the relationship because there was a bigger picture in mind. And I think now the problem is that our relationship has gone into such a downward spiral that people have forgotten the big picture and forgotten how to sort of manage through these mini crises that are often inspired by, exogenous events that we can't really control, or individuals even in a couple of these cases that we can't control. And I mean, in the scheme of things, this visit of Nancy Pelosi is here today, gone tomorrow, frankly. Next week we'll be on to something else, but we can't let this visit sort of leave an indelible negative mark on US-China relations, or frankly on the cross-strait relationship, which is really becoming difficult to handle. And if it's not handled well, and if the status quo isn't managed, it's going to end badly for many, many, many people. It's just not in anyone's interest to see that happen.
Having said that, though, Susan, a very important and constructive note that the two presidents spoke to one another a few days actually before this visit, and also they have been talking about how to solve the problems. Now, to what extent do you see the Chinese side should trust the words coming from the Biden administration about their willingness to establish kind of a dialogue mechanism between both sides, and particularly given their incapabilities right now politically within the US system?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's very healthy and important that the two leaders spoke before the visit. And that was even in spite of the fact that the news of the impending visit had been leaked. So they took advantage of the phone call to have a chance to coordinate on that. And I can't help but think that it certainly was better that they had that conversation before the visit than not having had it. I also note that in the readouts from the US side, there was much less talk about the framing of the US-China relationship as a strategic competition. There was more talk about trying to manage differences. There was more talk about trying to find areas of cooperation. And I think this just goes to show that, every administration that comes in the United States has an evolution in their China policy. And we're seeing, hopefully, that evolution play out again. It's taking a bit longer in this case, maybe because of the political frictions in our system, but that everyone wants to challenge China. The US is feeling like China is challenging it and is trying to usurp it on the global stage. And that makes for a difficult sort of political situation to handle. But over time, we learn, we talk, and we see that we actually have too many crises on a plate that are not about US-China relations and too many challenges to tackle, and that we need to work together.
Even more important question, Susan, is about strategically and fundamentally how China and the United States should see each other and be able to coexist, because nobody can destroy the other party. That's impossible.
Well, I think it's clear that we've got to transition from this mentality of being sort of a dominant player on the dominant player on the global stage, the dominant player in the international system, to a more of a burden sharing approach in the world with other major powers. And it's pretty obvious to me that over time, we're going to have to figure out how to sort of share those burdens and divide up responsibilities. But I think it's going to take an awfully long time to get there. That's going to be tricky. There's going to be a lot of pulling and hauling and some difficult moments there. But, we can't see each other as enemies if we're going to get there. So, we're going to have to see each other as some kind of collaborators in that process eventually.
Interview with Susan Thornton. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team. Thanks for being with us, and bye for now.